Pretty Girl Club. So today I'm going to be talking about good girl syndrome. By the way, if I'm echoing, it's because I'm recording in the business center. But does your mindset cancel out your privileges? I believe that everyone has privilege. I believe that there's a such thing as light skin privilege, dark skin privilege, white privilege, black privilege, pretty privilege. So after you have examined what your personal privileges are, the next thing you have to do is examine your mindset, or at least that's what I do. Because one thing I've learned is that if you suffer from good girl syndrome, that can actually cancel out your ability to utilize your privileges to your advantage. One of the main things about good girl syndrome is these women tend to suffer from toxic positivity. These are the women who have that mindset of everything will work out just fine, all things will work together for good. A lot of spiritual and religious communities teach positivity, but if you're not careful, it's very easy to get over into toxic positivity and to lower your boundaries. For example, oh, he may have beat my ass once, but God can change his heart. Oh, well, if he just balances his chakras and if I just put some essential oils on him, then suddenly he'll treat me right. Those are examples of toxic positivity. And that is a classic symptom of good girl syndrome. You feel like there is some sort of higher power within yourself, or you feel like you have the power to change people, like you can love people back to life. Like if you're just nice to the girl who's jealous of your beauty, then suddenly she will become your best friend. All of these are symptoms of good girl syndrome, and they hinder you from social climbing because good girls are very easy to manipulate. They're easy to control because the women who have good girl syndrome, these are the women who spent their lives following the rules. So they've spent their lives following the rules. These are the people who believe that if you work hard, you will be successful. So once again, that's one of the biggest lies that a lot of people are told in our society. And I'm actually going to name some examples of women who have good girl syndrome throughout this video. One example of good girl syndrome is Kelly Rowland. Kelly Rowland is very unproblematic. She carries herself with a lot of poise and class. She's very talented. But the problem with Kelly Rowland is that she didn't mind following the rules, kind of following Destiny's Child and just doing whatever they did and never progressing past Destiny's Child to the point where she could have a career that was on par with Beyonce. I actually believe that Kelly Rowland had the potential to be just as talented as Beyonce. Because think about it, they had the same vocal coaches, they had the same stylist or the same hairstylist, but because she kind of suffers from this good girl syndrome and not wanting to step outside of that good girl box, she was not able to progress her career in the same way that Beyonce has. Say what you want about Beyonce, you might be a fan of Beyonce, I'm a fan of Beyonce, but guess what? Beyonce has some very bitchy, very toxic qualities. I mean, let's be honest, everybody has toxic qualities. And so Beyonce is not immune from that. Do you know how many careers she has attempted to cancel behind the scenes? Beyonce does not have good girl syndrome when it comes to getting her bags and making sure that she stays on top in the music industry. So yes, of course, you could argue that, oh, maybe she's jealous of like Carrie Hilson or Rihanna or all these other artists. She very well could be. But what she has done is worked behind the scenes to cancel people. And you know what? It worked. And I'm not saying that this is good, but that's actually another symptom of good girl syndrome. It's believing that life is fair and also believing in karma, believing that people get what they deserve. That is completely false. That's a very toxic, positive mindset. Oh, he's going to get what he deserves. Oh, she's going to get what she deserves. No, that's not true. Bad people succeed all the time. Good people die poor all the time. People commit crimes and get away with it. People cheat on their taxes. Don't even get me started on capitalism, because if karma was real, then the United States, we would definitely not exist. And so one of the worst symptoms of good girl syndrome is having this mindset of life is fair. And this mindset of, I'm going to get what I deserve. So a lot of these good girls, the Kelly Rowlands, the Normanis, the Oneswas, these girls, and yes, I'm including an Exotical in there. I'm including Oneswa, who is a light-skinned black woman, in my opinion, especially compared to dark-skinned South African unambiguous people. But women who have these mindsets, the Kelly Rowlands, the Oneswas, and the Normanis, some of them have this mindset of, oh, if I'm just a good girl, if I'm nice to other girls, if I just play nice with other girls in the singing group, or if I just do my content and work hard, then I will be successful. That mindset actually prevents you from social climbing because you're too busy working harder and not working smarter. So Beyonce she's an example of a bad girl, in my opinion. She works hard, but she also works smart. She knows that, okay, I'm going to tour 6 months out of the year and then I'm going to take 6 months off. Like, she does things to set up a schedule for herself, or to associate with the right people. And guess what? Beyonce, she associates with some shady ass characters. I mean, she's associated with Jay-Z and Diddy. So Beyonce is an example of someone who actually does not have good girl syndrome. She is probably doing things behind the scenes to keep herself relevant. She probably has been doing that for years. I don't know what she's been doing behind the scenes. I do think that she's talented, but I also think that there are other people who probably could have been just as talented as her. But that's another symptom of good girl syndrome, that life is fair or that people get what they deserve. So another example of someone with good girl syndrome is Queen Chama on YouTube. She recently made a video talking about Ekane and how Ekane does not deserve the fame that she has. And it's like, well, regardless of whether or not you believe someone deserves the fame that they have, they still have it. And so that's actually another symptom of good girl syndrome. You expect life to be fair. You expect people to get what they deserve because you believe in karma. And then you get mad when someone like Ekane uses her bad girl skills, because if I'm not mistaken, Ekane actually does a lot of bad stuff. You know, you're mad when somebody uses their bad girl side or dark femininity, you know, doing all these toxic things to get famous and to find a loophole in the Black community and kind of fill the Black community's need to watch problematic content. So Ekane sees that and she fills that need. And, you know, it may not be the most moral thing in the world, but she's never tried to come off like she's some morally sound princess. So that's another example of good girl syndrome and how it can actually hinder you from your desires. It can hinder you from social climbing. It's because you have this mindset of, if I'm just nice to everyone and I do everything right and I just follow all these scriptures, or I follow all of these mantras, or if I just treat everybody how I want to be treated and play fair and follow the rules, then I'm going to win. I've seen a lot of women do this in terms of relationships as well. They have this mindset of, oh, I'm in shape, I'm pretty, I'm educated, I have all these things going for me, so where is my husband or where's my man? First of all, not only is that making the man a prize, but also that's a false mindset. Nobody owes you anything. So men don't actually owe you anything, and men are actually very good at not giving you shit, especially if you are a good girl. A lot of people will actually take advantage of you if you're a good girl, because a lot of good girls struggle with boundary setting. And I'm going to use Kelly Rowland as an example again. She clearly struggles with boundary setting and sticking to those boundaries because she spent years playing second fiddle to Beyonce, thinking that it wouldn't affect her career, thinking that being seen as the second fiddle would not affect her brand. You know, so she was not socially strategic. She did not release as much music as Beyonce or do as much performances and stuff like that. And maybe she didn't want to, I'm not sure. But then in interviews, she had no problem talking about Beyonce or bigging up Beyonce or utilizing her association to Beyonce to social climb in terms of publicity. But then as Beyonce continued to social climb and break barriers and do controversial things, such as creating a country album to spite people who were formerly racist against her, you know, people wanted to ask Kelly Rowland about that. And then she got upset about that, or, you know, she got upset at people treating her like she's not that big of a star. Well, the reality is, if you didn't have good girl syndrome, you would be able to recognize the fact that you are not as big of a star as Beyonce. And I'm not trying to say it to be mean. I mean, everybody has certain things they're good at. I have no problem saying that my channel is not as big as a lot of other YouTube channels, and that is totally okay. I accept where I'm at right now. I'm grateful for where I am at, and I am going to build myself up, you know, instead of getting mad or allowing it to be a diss against me. But I've noticed that women with good girl syndrome, they don't like it when other people do better than them. And that's because they have this entitlement. There's an entitlement that comes with being a good girl to where you actually get mad. You're like, wait a minute. How dare they be a colorist and still be successful? How dare they be racist and still be successful? And it's like, yeah, that's the world we live in, sis. There are people who are colorist, racist, texturist, featurist, capitalist. And also, another thing about good girls is good girls have a lot of blind spots. So for example, they're mad about colorism and not benefiting from colorism, but then they themselves benefit from capitalism. So you want to talk about isms? Let's talk about all the isms. There are plenty of people who would love to be African American rather than South African, as we saw with Oneswa, who is actually an exotical, in my opinion, who has good girl syndrome. She was talking about basically being jealous of the privilege that Nara Smith has, being an American and being able to get paid for TikTok views. And notice how Oneswa, throughout her video, she tried to paint herself as a good girl. You know, she was kind of going through this psychosis. She was jumping through all these mental hoops because she's going through cognitive dissonance. And so she was portraying herself as a good girl who doesn't care about money, but then complaining about not having money. This is a typical good girl problem. You pride yourself on your morals. You pride yourself on your values. You know, you pride yourself on doing things the right way. But then when you don't get your way, because the world is not a good world, so why play fair in an unfair world? When things don't go your way, then suddenly you want to complain and say, well, they're benefiting from isms. You know, they're benefiting from capitalism. They live in a country where they get paid off their TikTok views and I don't. Well, yeah, everybody is working off of whatever privileges they were born with or whatever privileges they have attained. So as an American person, Nara Smith, well, I don't know if she was born in America, but Americans, we're not going to say, oh, you know what, it's messed up that my country has basically, you know, done bad stuff to other countries and capitalism is bad. So like now I'm not going to get a job. I'm not going to have any wealth at all because I don't want to benefit from an ism. No, good girls don't understand that everybody has certain privileges. Everybody, even the good girl herself, has privileges and they are utilizing those privileges to their advantages unapologetically. But another toxic mindset of the good girl is that privilege is wrong. And by the way, I actually agree. Privilege is wrong. All of the isms are bad. All of the isms are wrong. Stereotyping is bad. Racism is bad. You know, classism is bad. All of the isms are bad. But guess what? All of the isms still exist. And for those of you who have the audacity to talk about classism, I better see you living in the hood. I better not see you in any suburbs. I better not see you driving a nice car that's decent. So once again, all of this stuff is fake outrage. A lot of people with good girl syndrome, they suffer from fake outrage. It's very easy to rage bait the good girl because, you know, she believes that the world should be a good place. She believes that by her having these high status, high class morals, that somehow she's going to change the world into this perfect utopian society. And no, you're not going to. You may be able to feel good about yourself, and that's wonderful, and that's great. I'm glad you feel good about yourself. I'm glad you feel like a good person. But the problem with good girl syndrome is that you end up boxing yourself off. You end up kind of siphoning off some of your desires. So if you're a good girl, you better not have any bad girl desires. Because guess what? If you desire to be rich, that means that you desire to benefit from capitalism. If you desire to be seen as pretty, then that means that you desire to benefit from lookism, aka pretty privilege. So the same people that shame you for benefiting from isms, they themselves want to benefit from an ism. They want to benefit from capitalism, from classism. So do you see how a lot of good girls actually have this selective morality and they don't accept that about themselves? You know, they'll lie to themselves actually, like Oneswa did, and then they'll say, oh, I didn't come on here for money. I'm just a South African mom trying to take care of my son. And then she will go on to drag a woman who is unapologetically operating in her pretty privilege. You know, Nara Smith, she is a model. So she's unapologetic about the fact that she benefits from pretty privilege. Obviously, Nara Smith is aware of that. That's why she pursued modeling. She knows in the modeling industry, you know, they're going to like how I look, so let me go after that. But good girls are too afraid to step out of their box, and so then they get pissed off when somebody else steps out of the box. Another thing that holds back the good girl is the belief that, you know, isms are wrong. And like I said, isms are wrong, of course. Classism, capitalism, colorism, texturism, featureism, racism, all of the isms are wrong and all of them are bad. But guess what? They still exist. And so I need to learn how to strategically, socially engineer myself to a position of power. And then from my position of power, then I can do whatever I want to, you know, try to change the world or whatever, you know, so I can start off by utilizing certain privileges I have to become an op in a bad system, you know, so I can benefit from this capitalism and all that. And then I can use my social power to help others if I want to. A good example of this is Rihanna. Rihanna does not have good girl syndrome. She is a bad girl. In fact, she calls herself bad girl Riri. You know what she did? People tried to bully her out of the music industry and tried to take her money, allegedly. And so she just said, you know what, fuck it. I know that I'm seen as pretty. I know that I benefit heavily from pretty privilege. And so let me utilize my pretty privilege to become a beauty icon and to become a billionaire. And then from my high social position of being a billionaire, then I can, talk about whatever I want or do whatever I want. And also, Rihanna, she started Fenty, which actually featured more diverse shades for women of color. So Rihanna benefited from isms. She benefited from colorism and featureism. And she also benefited from pretty privilege, aka lookism. And then she utilized those skills to become a music artist. So she's benefiting from capitalism. She's also benefiting from popularity and stuff like that. And then from that position of power, then she started a makeup line to help fellow women of color. So that's what I promote on this channel. I promote utilizing whatever you were born with or utilizing whatever privileges you have to attain as much social power as you want. And then once you get into the position of power, then you can go back and say, okay, now let me kind of fill the cup of others. Let me fill my cup first, and then I will fill other people's cups instead of being a good girl and constantly walking around with an empty cup like Kelly Rowland, constantly in these emotional, becoming emotionally dysregulated because I'm being mistreated as an unambiguous black woman in Hollywood, or I'm being mistreated as Beyonce's backup singer, or, kind of the flunky to Beyonce. So she played the good girl role for so long to the point where people think they can step on Kelly Rowland now. So now she has no choice but to actually, in her 40s or however old she is, 20 years into her career, now she has to finally go back and kind of undo all of that good girl image that she has been building up for all of these years because it's not benefiting her. And now she's starting to suffer the repercussions of being constantly seen as this good girl. Also, a lot of women will try to use being a good girl so that they can social climb above the bad girls, and that'll never work. Bad girls will win, good girls finish last because we live in an unfair world. And so I'm not saying like be a bad girl as in like abuse people or like, mistreat people at every turn. No, but I am saying that guess what? I do want to benefit from capitalism, and I have no shame in admitting that to myself. You don't have to go around shouting from the mountaintops that you want to benefit from a particular ism, but guess what? With every ism that you benefit from, somebody else suffers from that same ism or from being at the bottom of that ism. We saw that with Oneswa. She was saying that, hey, I'm at the bottom of capitalism compared to Americans because I don't get paid for TikTok views, and this privileged, wealthy American woman, she gets paid for views. So that's an example of Nara benefiting from an ism. It was actually about capitalism, even though the black community wrongly tried to make it about colorism. Both women are considered light-skinned, in my opinion. Both women will technically benefit from quote-unquote colorism. So it was not about colorism. It was actually about capitalism. It was about classism. It was about social status. And so if you want to benefit from an ism, guess what? Somebody is going to suffer on the other side of that ism. I know that it's bad, but you cannot help the way that you were born. I can't help that I was born in the United States where they get paid for TikToks and stuff. But at the same time, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be poor now? Am I supposed to move out of the country and go to a country where they don't pay so that I can show solidarity with random strangers who are probably not going to do anything to help me either? And so the thing about good girls is their guilt holds them back. So if you come from a background of being a good girl, which I do myself, I was a very devout Christian. Good girls are held back by guilt. Maybe you have light skin guilt, you have pretty girl guilt, you have mixed race guilt, you have texturism guilt, you have featureism guilt. So you're guilty for the way that you were born because maybe your religion teaches that all those things are really bad. You feel guilty that you were born wealthy, but I don't see wealthy women who were born into generational wealth saying, oh, hey, sorry, mom and dad, I know you want to pass down the house to me. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be poor because it's not fair that I'm benefiting from capitalism. That's not fair that I'm benefiting from an ism. So I'm going to give up my privilege and I'm just going to live the rest of my life being poor, so that I can prove to other people how good of a person I am. That's the biggest flaw of the good girl. That's the biggest flaw in good girl syndrome. You have a constant desire to people please or to prove to others how good of a person you are, and then the person never reciprocates, or the person rarely reciprocates. Another aspect of good girl syndrome is pretending like you're holier than thou. This happened with the Akane situation. People tried to pretend like, oh, well, this is bad. Or same thing with Chrissy, actually. She was like, Exoticals United, she's laughing at black femicide. Meanwhile, with Ekane, there were plenty of people laughing at black femicide. Ekane identifies as black, and she's in a domestic violence situation. She shows pictures and videos of herself bloody on TikTok. She talks about her boyfriend apparently going to jail and stuff like that. There are plenty of other black women who are actually being killed every day. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that a black woman is unalived every 6 hours, but I don't see any of the black content creators talking about actual black femicide. Not a comment on the internet, but I'm talking about the actual real black femicide. And so that's another thing with good girls. Their defense mechanism is to act holier than thou. Like, hey, I'm a good person because I didn't laugh at these jokes. I'm a good person because I'm religious. I'm a good person because I am Christian. You are not a good person because you don't have the same beliefs as me. But that's actually a gaslighting tactic. And so bad girls, or women like myself who practice things like dark femininity, social climbing, and who study dark psychology, I can see right through those good girl tactics. I can see right through the gaslighting. Like when Oneswa says, I didn't come here for the money, and then proceeds to talk about how many brand deals she had received within the past 5 years. Well, why are you keeping track? Why are you taking brand deals? You just said a couple seconds ago that you didn't come here for money. That is classic good girl syndrome. You're constantly contradicting yourself and word vomiting and not even realizing that you're trying to act like you're holier than thou. Like, I'm a good person. Nara Smith is a bad person because she copied my content. Meanwhile, you copied the whole Asian community. And by the way, I'm not trying to be mean because, like I said, I actually consider Oneswa to be a woman of this community. But she has the mindset, she has the same good girl syndrome, the same kind of victim inferiority complex, not about her skin tone, but about her class, about her socioeconomic status, because she kept bringing it up. She brought up money 5 or 6 times throughout that video, and she said she didn't care about money. But that's something that a lot of good girls will do. They'll try to pretend like they're holier than thou. They will try to pretend like, oh, I'm a good person. Kind of like Queen Chama in that video she made about Ekane. She said, just because Ekane's famous, it doesn't mean you have to act like a bitch, Ekane. And then Queen Chama goes on to explain how she's never changed from day one. She is still a humble, sweet Nigerian girl. She's always been a good girl. She was basically promoting how good of a girl she is so that the viewer can subconsciously compare Queen Chama's morals to Ekane's morals, and then, hopefully Queen Chama comes out on top. That was actually a psychological manipulation tactic that Queen Chama herself didn't even realize that she was trying to utilize. She was actually trying to gaslight her audience into thinking, oh, I'm a more morally sound person than Ekane. But it's like, that's still a bad social climbing tactic, because even if people think you're a good person, it doesn't mean that suddenly Ekane is going to have 0 followers and Queen Chama is going to have 4 million followers. And I also noticed that Queen Chama, in that video, she went out of her way and she pulled up Ekane's TikTok and searched and wanted to see how many followers she had. If you're such a good girl and you've been the same since day one and you're still humble and all that stuff, why do you care about another woman's followers and social status, right? You're not here for social status. You don't care about social status. You're a good girl. Good girls are not supposed to care about social status and social climbing. Hence why good girls have a hard time attaining social status and social climbing. This is why you see the women in the church who are getting cheated on by their pastor husbands, or, these women who they never speak up for themselves and then they get abused and stuff like that. Same thing with Oneswa. Notice how Oneswa even said in her video that she had never spoken up for herself, and then she broke down into tears because of the anger and the rage and the jealousy and the inferiority she was feeling in comparison to Nara Smith, who allows herself to be more free. Because guess what? Nara Smith is actually religious. Nara Smith is a Mormon, but guess what? Nara Smith doesn't give a fuck about what you think of her Mormonism. People have critiqued Nara Smith for a long time, saying that she doesn't dress properly. She's not modest. She doesn't dress like a proper Mormon, and she doesn't act Mormon enough. But Nara Smith is not so tied to her Mormon values to the point where she allows them to hold her back from social climbing. She's like, oh, hell no. I'm still a model. Like, I'm going to model. I'm going to show myself in a bikini. I'm going to show myself with makeup on. I'm going to show myself with these backless shirts, going on camera braless and letting my boobs pop out and still be cute. And Nara Smith has actually been authentic in saying that, hey, I'm not a diehard Mormon, or I'm not a diehard, basically, I'm not a diehard good girl. I'm not a diehard good girl, I'm not a diehard Mormon. I'm going to break some of the rules. And so that is the biggest weakness of the women who have good girl syndrome. They don't break the rules, and then they get mad when you break the rules. They get mad when E. Kane, broke the rules. You're breaking social rules, E. Kane, by acknowledging that you have light skin privilege and then throwing it back in their face. Like, oh, you think I have privilege? Okay, fine, bitch, I have privilege. Now what? Who gonna check me? Oh, no, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, that's bad. You're a bad person. E. Kane doesn't give a fuck if you think she's a bad person. And that is actually her strength. She doesn't care about being perceived as ghetto, ratchet. You know those women who, the good girls, the good girl black women, who say, oh, well, Cardi B's bad because she's being ratchet. She's meeting stereotypes. So-and-so, E. Kane, she's being bad because she's meeting negative stereotypes. First of all, not only are they hypocritical because they don't keep the same energy with JT from City Girls and other women like that, but also they're hypocritical because they think that you're not allowed to be ratchet, basically. Like if you're light skinned, or just if you're black in general, that you're suddenly not allowed to be ratchet. But guess what? There are black women out there like E. Kane who don't care if you think they're ratchet. There are women out there like Cardi B who don't care if you think they're ratchet. There are women like Ice Spice and stuff who are like, hey, I want to be the bad girl. I want to be the ratchet girl. And guess what? Who gonna check me? And I'm gonna get paid off of being ratchet. So do you see how good girl syndrome can actually hold you back from your desires? Because what if you're a good girl, but deep down inside you want to be sexy? That happened to me when I was religious. I was very modest. I didn't grow up being able to wear like makeup and like wear my hair down my back and stuff like that, wearing two-piece swimsuits. I didn't grow up being allowed to do that. I was a good girl. But secretly, I had the desire to wear makeup. I wanted to wear red lipstick. I wanted to explore with eyeshadow colors and, see which one looks good on me, or to wear the forbidden hair weaves or the forbidden hair extensions because I wasn't allowed to wear weaves. Like my dad, when he found out that I had some tracks in the back of my hair, because I didn't even have the full sew-in. I just had a couple of tracks sewn into the back. And once he found out that I had that, he was like, no, you can't do that. Like, you can't have weaves. That's deceitful, so another thing about good girls is their authenticity actually holds them back. Good girls are the ones who are constantly trying to please others. They're trying to prove to others, hey, I'm down with you, I'm down to earth. And so it actually holds them back because the women who use selective authenticity, or the women who use deception, they use the makeup, they use the hair extensions, which are technically forms of deception. They are enhancements. They use enhancements, whether it's a social enhancement, benefiting from an ism, that's a social enhancement. It enhances your social power. If you are from a wealthy country, you're benefiting from an ism. Guess what? You live in a country that profits off of exploiting other countries. You live in a country that profits off of people who work in sweatshops and stuff like that, and children who work in sweatshops. Do I agree with that? Do I agree with all the isms? Of course not. Of course I think isms are bad. I think privileges are bad. They shouldn't exist. But guess what? They still do. And so I need to survive like everyone else. I want to achieve my dreams like everyone else. And I want to get my social power so that I can reach back and help whoever I want to help. And this is another flaw of the good girl, actually. She's constantly in the back, and so she's begging others to be her representation. They're begging white Hollywood to be their corrective promotion. They're begging black men to date them. They're begging white men to date them, or they're begging for jobs, begging for opportunities, and coming online crying, begging for followers, and hoping that they can receive the breadcrumbs of higher status people, such as Nara Smith. Like when Oneswe came on, that whole thing was essentially her begging for followers. I mean, this was all about TikTok followers so that she can get brand deals because she doesn't get paid off views. Even though she started off saying, I'm not here for money, I'm just taking care of my son. She brought her son into it as a subconscious psychological manipulation to get you to show empathy, because she knows that us Americans, when we think of an underprivileged South African person and her son, you're going to think of those little kids that you see in the charity commercials. You're going to think of those kids that you see begging, so it's going to make you go, oh my God, that's horrible. This big bad capitalist, Nara Smith, she's benefiting from isms. And, here is this sweet, innocent woman, and she's basically taking money, taking food out of the mouths of little African children. And so, of course, it's a way to pull on your heartstrings, especially if you're black. And the black community fell for it hook, line, and sinker because a lot of women in the black community suffer from good girl syndrome. Another aspect of somebody who has good girl syndrome is she is scared to seek after privilege while being mad at others who have it. So she is afraid to seek after pretty privilege, for example. She's afraid to wear the makeup, to dress up, to do whatever, but then she gets pissed off when her friends dress up. And then she'll be like, oh, you're doing too much. Anytime somebody says you're doing too much, what they really mean is you're outdoing me. So these are the good girls. They secretly want the privilege, but then they're too scared to go after it because obviously it would harm their good girl reputation to ruthlessly social climb or to be a capitalist or to become rich and stuff. So they will just stay mad. They'll stay mad 24/7. And then people like Kane, some of the women who don't care about being the bad girl, they'll be like, okay, stay mad, bitch. Guess what? I am benefiting from XYZ, and you know what? I am rich, or I am pretty, or I do benefit from certain things. And now what? Who gonna check me? And then that enrages the good girl, because another weakness of the good girl is she lacks emotional control. It's very easy to emotionally dysregulate the good girl archetype, because good girls are women who, they're constantly triggered by the world around them because they've spent their lives being good, and then they don't realize, wait, I'm living in a world that's not good. I'm playing fair in an unfair world. Why am I constantly at the bottom? That's another side effect of being a good girl for so long. You're going to feel like you're at the bottom. You're going to be like Oneswa, where she didn't stack her money up so she can move to a place where she wanted to get paid off TikTok. She can't admit to herself that, hey, I really want to do this TikTok thing full time, or I want to do this chef thing full time. Some people came into my comment section trying to argue, saying that I guess Oneswa is like a master chef or something, or she was on some TV shows, or she was doing these competitions or something like that for cooking. Okay, so instead of just admitting to yourself, hey, I like to do chef competitions, or, I like to be on TV. I want to be famous. Instead of admitting that, you would rather play the good girl role because you think it will take you farther, being a good girl. Oh, I'm just a nice, sweet South African mom who, I'm just minding my business. No, that doesn't actually take you farther. It reminds me of Kelly Rowland. Oh, I'm just the nice, supportive, dark-skinned, unambiguous best friend of the superstar. Instead of admitting to yourself, hey, no, I want Beyonce's position. Actually, Kelly Rowland, she did admit in a song that she wanted Beyonce's position, like socially or as far as fame or whatever. Okay, so that is step one, is admitting it to yourself. But then step two is you got to go get it, baby. You got to go and make the songs. You got to go and make the TikToks. You have to go and move to the country where you can succeed the most. I've specifically talked about how to utilize geographical location to your advantage. I've talked about talent privilege on here. So Kelly Rowland has talent privilege. Oneswa could attain geographical privilege if she wanted to, or if it's that serious, if you're crying over it, yeah, that means, guess what? I need to move. I need to get out of this place where I can't get paid for my passions. I want to be paid for my passions just like anyone else. I want to live the soft life just like anyone else. That is another side effect of being a good girl. You're never going to have the soft life. You know why? Because you have an external locus of control. You're a people pleaser. And by the way, none of this is directed to you guys watching this, but I'm just saying, I'm talking to myself here too. You're basically like the people pleasing type. And so you want to make your parents proud. You want to make your family proud. You want to make your community proud. You're carrying the Black community on your shoulders. You're carrying your parents on your shoulders. You're carrying the expectations of men on your shoulders. You're carrying the expectations of your job on your shoulders. I mean, literally carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders emotionally. And so these are the women who actually become hypervigilant. And so they're looking for who's colorist, who's texturist, who's racist, who's featurist. And they're constantly kind of in this protesting mode because they feel like, hey, since I'm a good girl, everybody else needs to be that way. Hey, since I think colorism is bad, or since I think all the isms are bad, everybody else needs to think they're bad and stop benefiting from them. But guess what? You'll never be able to control other people. So that's another flaw of the good girl syndrome. You think that you can emotionally manipulate people into being how you want them to be. You think that by setting the example, that's one of the biggest lies, by the way. Oh, if you just set a positive example and just be a good girl, then other people will follow you and you will change the world. No, you actually won't, with all due respect. Because human beings are independent. You can't control somebody's mind. I mean, yes, maybe you can inspire people. Martin Luther King was inspiring, but do you think that every Black man in America acts like Martin Luther King? Absolutely not. So guess what? If you are the good girl, people are going to look at you. They're going to be inspired by you. They're going to say, "Wow, that's very admirable." And then they're going to move on and they're going to continue doing what they were doing. They're going to do what they want, because you cannot control or emotionally manipulate someone into doing what you want them to do. So just because you call out so and so's colorist, racist, texturist, features, that doesn't mean they're going to get canceled. In fact, I would argue that they will not get canceled, because as a person who studies sociology, I have not found one example of where cancel culture actually worked. People are still paying $1,000 just to take pictures with Chris Brown, who they said was a colorist, who wouldn't even let women in his section, apparently. He wouldn't let black women in his section or something like that. So women are still paying $1,000 just to take a picture with him. Or they're still going to his concerts and actually complaining that he didn't let them in their section. If there was a racist white guy, let's say I was at a club and there's some racist white actor, and let's say I had a crush on him or something, and then he says, "I don't want any women of color in my section. I only want blue-eyed blondes." I would not actually get mad and complain and say, "Oh my God, that's not fair. Oh my God, Chris Evans, he didn't want me in his section. He needs to change that. He needs to let women like me come in his section." That is begging. You're begging for a man who doesn't want you. I would never do that. You know what I would say? I would be like, okay, first of all, I no longer have a crush on him or like him or whatever, and I'm going to go to where I am celebrated instead of begging a man who does not like me, begging him to suddenly like me. That is no different than the red pill men who get mad and say, "Well, she's a gold digger. She only wants a man with money." Yeah, so what? Those are her standards. Now what? Who gonna check her? And so even if people have racist standards or bad standards, colorist, fatphobic standards, guess what? They're still their standards. You cannot use pity to get somebody to put you on a pedestal. A lot of good girls are bad at social climbing because they're playing fair in an unfair world. And so good girls find themselves constantly shouting from the abyss, constantly raging and warrioring and preaching to everybody and getting on their soapbox and talking about all their political views and talking about how angry they are, at the government or at capitalism or at colorism, texturism, featureism, instead of utilizing what social strategies they were born with, or privilege stacking to attain those privileges that they want. Instead of doing that, no, they have to take the long way around. Basically, they can't take any shortcuts. And the world is filled with loopholes, the world is filled with shortcuts, the world is filled with cheat codes, and the good girls, they have siphoned themselves off from using any of these things, because it goes against their good girl morals. So that's what you heard Queen Trauma complaining about. Like, "Oh, what the heck? I've always been humble and nice and kind, and just because Kane's famous, it doesn't mean she gets to act like a bitch." No, actually, she can act like a bitch if she wants to. She can be as bitchy as she wants. There are bitches who become famous all the time. There are guys who are assholes who will continue to be assholes no matter what you say. But that's one of the flaws of being a good girl. You're going to constantly notice other people being bad and getting away with it. And when I say being bad, what I mean is they're breaking your social norms. So, they're kind of flexing their money, or they're wearing makeup. Maybe you don't wear makeup, or you think makeup is bad, or you look down on beauty enhancements or whatever. You look down on surgeries and stuff like that. So then you get pissed off, kind of like that one Exotical did. I did a video on her as well, and I critiqued her as well. It's funny how a lot of people, they think that I only critique unambiguous black women. I've actually brought smoke to members of my own community, as well as Miss Refrigerator, who's a non-black Latina. Like, I've brought smoke to a lot of people on this channel just to teach the pretty girls a lesson. But that girl who's an Exotical, she was actually upset because she went the good girl route, and she actually talked about it in her TikToks. She talked about how, she's classy and whatever, and she would never get a BBL. But then the other girl who had the BBL, she had thousands, tens of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok, and I guess she was some sort of OnlyFans creator or something. So then you got the good girl complaining, it's not fair that this woman is getting all this attention, she has all these followers. So once again, that girl, that other Exotical, she actually had good girl syndrome. So deep down inside, she wants attention. It may not be for her butt, but maybe she wants some other kind of attention. I looked on her TikTok and I saw that she was doing fitness influencing. So it's interesting that she was doing fitness influencing, and then she became mad at a woman with a BBL who was working on her fitness as well. So once again, the good girls, they often struggle very deeply with things like jealousy and feeling like they're never enough, because you're never good enough. You're never going to be good enough. You will never be perfect. And this is the constant battle that a lot of good girls are fighting. It's that battle of perfectionism. It's that battle of I'm always at the bottom. Somebody's always able to cheat their way past me. Like Oneswa, she was crying. She was literally breaking down into tears and becoming emotionally dysregulated because she was so upset at Nara Smith's success. Nara Smith, she has a lot of privileges that she has stacked in her favor. She married a celebrity. Who knows anything about that guy? That guy could be horrible. He could have a horrible personality. I don't know. But she married a celebrity. That's a form of social climbing. She became a model herself, which is a form of social climbing. She utilizes her beauty to her advantage. That's a form of social climbing. She is not afraid to promote her biracial background. That is definitely a form of social climbing. She uses her aesthetics and kind of this trad wife aesthetic thing to her favor. That's also a form of social climbing. So she has done 5 different things that a lot of good girls will never do because they feel like, oh no, that's cheating. That's bad. I shouldn't flaunt my relationship, or I shouldn't try to, go on camera with these backless, braless tops when I'm a Mormon. That goes against being a good girl. But Nara Smith, she doesn't have the same good girl limitations that women like Oneswa have, or women like that other girl who got mad on TikTok. She doesn't have those same limitations. And so the benefit of not being a good girl is you don't hold yourself to the same standards as these women who pride themselves on their morals. The women who pride themselves on their morals too much, those are the women who will constantly be in this battle of, oh crap, I did something mean. Oh, I feel guilty. Another thing about the good girl syndrome is that she only seeks after friendships and she does not seek allies or colleagues. So the difference between a friendship and like an ally or a colleague is allies and colleagues, you do business together. You are collaborating in terms of your business. Maybe you don't know that person personally, but you do good work together. You may not necessarily like agree with everything they say and do, but maybe you can work together as a collective with those people so that you can succeed. But a lot of good girls, they put themselves first. They put their morals first, or their spirituality, or they put their personal values first. And that's not a bad thing, but just don't expect to social climb. That's all. Like, if you want to be a good girl, be a good girl, but just accept the fact that you will never be able to social climb farther than the women who play unfair in an unfair world. But that's another flaw, is a lot of good girls, they lack allies, they lack colleagues, they don't know how to quote unquote stay on code, because if the code goes against their personal beliefs, then they're not doing the code. In fact, with good girls, it's very difficult to influence their code that they stay on. Good girls are oftentimes afraid of conflict as well. So let's say, for example, that you're a good girl who started a YouTube channel. Let's say you started, I'll use the Exotical space as an example. For some women, you can bully them off YouTube because they're afraid of conflict. And so if you start giving them the smoke, or you start like coming back with talking points, or you start calling out their flaws, or if you're able to pick apart their inferiority complexes, they will leave. They will flee. And so good girls also have a hard time maintaining friendships because they have a hard time being loyal. They sometimes have a hard time being loyal because they're people pleasers, or at least some of them struggle with people pleasing. And so for the good girl, let's say that like her mom and her dad get into a fight. Sometimes a good girl has a hard time picking a side. She has a hard time standing 10 toes down. These are the types of women who are afraid to point fingers and name names in their YouTube videos, such as Queen Chama and Chrissy. I have no problem saying the exact names of who I'm talking about. So you can't come on my channel and say, you're talking about all unambiguous Black women. I'm actually talking about 2 unambiguous Black women, and I said their names. So nobody can accuse me of generalizations. But women who suffer from good girl syndrome, they are the type to beat around the bush. They're the type to where if you get in an argument, or if you're having a hard time, these are the fair weather friends. Like, a lot of good girls, unfortunately, can end up being fair weather friends to where they're only around you if you're doing good, or if you're being a good girl. And let's say you go through something, or you say something bad, or you make a mistake, a lot of good girls will not want to be associated with you because they're like, oh shit, I have to follow the rules. There are actually some YouTubers on here who are very big YouTubers who support my channel, but they don't want to come out and publicly support my channel because they're afraid that their subscribers will unsubscribe, or they'll lose their platform. And I'm not mad at that, because if that's your mode of operation, that's fine. But a lot of girls who are good girls and stuff like that, or good men, sometimes they do struggle with maintaining friendships, or they struggle with having a social circle. They don't know how to build allies, really. And so, one of the strengths of a bad girl is even if you don't agree on everything, you still know how to get shit done. You still know how to make money moves. You still know how to stand 10 toes down with your community. That's why even on my channel, like sometimes people will say, "Oh, Exoticals United, what do you think about this other exotical who said something different than you? Or what do you think about this other exotical who has a different style or a different lifestyle?" You know, some women are trad wives in this space. Some women are kind of like housewives. Some women are divestors. Some women are, I don't know, tall, short, fat, skinny, whatever. And my response is, I still stand 10 toes down. I don't care if you're a trad wife. That's why I stood 10 toes down with Nara Smith. I don't care if she's a trad wife. I don't care if she's whatever. If I resonate with somebody, like if they resonate with what I talk about on this channel, or if they are one of my allies, I know how to still respect people, even if they have a different view than me, even if they have a different lifestyle than me, even if they have their own definitions, like on their channels or something like that. But good girls, where they struggle is if you have a different view than her, or if you do something to where she feels like, you know, that's bad, like, oh, you're a sugar baby, that's bad, then sometimes with the good girls, they actually will turn you into their enemy because they will view you as maybe being demonic or being like problematic or saying problematic stuff. And so they're scared of conflict themselves. And so if you ever say something problematic, let's say you make a problematic joke or something like that. So for example, with Kane, I actually think that Kane, she makes problematic content. But what I like about Kane and what I respect and will continue to respect is the fact that she stands 10 toes down and says, yes, I make problematic content. You know, she's very authentic with who she is. And so I will always respect that more than worrying about, oh, well, she's ratchet, so I can't associate with her. There are ratchet people in my own family, but I still show up for them. You know, I still love them and stuff like that. So with good girls, though, they put their personal morals or their personal spirituality or their personal traumas and insecurities first. And so they don't know how to actually build allies. They don't know how to work with other people. They're in constant conflict. And this is a flaw that I see on YouTube channels like Chrissy. Yeah, I don't have a problem critiquing YouTubers because they're going to critique me. So this is actually a flaw. If you were to ask Chrissy on YouTube, name 25 unambiguous dark-skinned black women who you want all of your followers to go follow. Name 25. And tell them to go subscribe to their channels. Name 25 black women who have different talking points than you, who you don't mind your subscribers subscribing to. And they're going to have a hard time because that's actually a part of good girl syndrome. If somebody has any views that are different than you, if they have any political views different than yours, any lifestyle that's different than yours, you're triggered as a good girl because you're like, oh my God, what? You had sex outside of marriage? Oh my God, you're ratchet? Kane, you can't do that. It's like, no, you can't be ratchet because, you know, maybe it goes against your morals and that's okay. But there are still going to be other women who are going to be ratchet. Maybe you can't embrace your privileges because you've been taught that privilege is bad, which it is bad. But some people, they embrace things that are bad. You know, it's kind of like me. Like I am technically embracing capitalism by working a job, getting paid. So yes, I'm technically bad myself. So I'd rather just be honest and say, hey, you know, I'm doing stuff that's bad. Yes, my country is sometimes bad. I'd rather be honest and authentic than trying to portray this good girl image and then getting shocked and getting enraged when a person like Kane exists. Or when a person like Nara Smith gets paid off of her TikTok views and I don't. That's not fair. Another thing that good girls struggle with is they are scared to do things alone. So have you ever noticed how in the media, a lot of times the women who are perceived as successful, usually they are also popular. So like they have friends or they have a boyfriend or they have a husband, they have a family. But a lot of good girls, they fall for that trap that, you know, you need other people in order to be happy. You need other people around you supporting you in order to be viewed as successful. So a lot of good girls, they're too shy or too scared to like write that book. They're too scared to do their YouTube. They're too scared to say what they really want to say on YouTube. They're too scared to come out and be who they are. Maybe some, you know, those people that are like LGBT, they're in the closet or something like that. Maybe they struggle with good girl syndrome or good boy syndrome to where you're not supposed to go outside of the norms of your community. You're not supposed to go outside of the norms of your culture. So people who struggle with this, they actually are the ones who are seeking approval. So they're constantly seeking approval. They're waiting for other people to give them permission to start their channel. I've actually got a lot of emails from girls who are asking me, am I an exotical? They're like sending me pictures of their facial features or sending me pictures of their hair textures and their racial backgrounds and stuff. They're like, am I an exotical? Do you think I'm an exotical? What do you think of me? I don't control you. Don't wait for me to give you permission to identify yourself how you want to identify. That was the whole point of this channel. This channel is really supposed to be kind of like a beck and call so that those who identify with my content can come forward and say, hey, I identify with this. I'm a pretty girl. And by the way, when I use the term pretty girl club just means my subscribers, the people who are subscribed who can relate to the content. So in the Pretty Girl Club, there are actually women of all races. So I have white women who follow my channel. I have like Indian women who follow this channel. Yeah, everybody, unambiguous black women who follow the channel, because all of those women, they identify as, hey, I'm a pretty girl. Hey, I'm a girl who is decentering men, or I'm a girl who relates to the content. So it's about being able to self-identify. But a lot of good girls, they don't know how to self-identify because they've been identified by others as being the good girl. And so they have a hard time actually changing their own identity. They don't take ownership over their own identity. So they're constantly seeking the validation of others. They want other people, they're going to ask you, do you think this about me? What do you think of who I am? What do you think of my business idea? What do you think of my YouTube channel? And they don't know how to take ownership. So that actually makes them struggle with knowing who they are, because they're allowing other people to control their self-perception. And so then they'll try to turn around and actually project that onto you. They'll try to guilt you and be like, oh, Nara Smith, you should feel guilty for all the money you've made and for all the success you've had on TikTok, being in America, getting paid for views. Oh, Kane, you should feel guilty for getting mad at that woman who bullied you on the live stream, and you shouldn't have said what you have said. And it's like, well, you can tell her that all you want, but that's not going to cancel her. You're not her pastor. You're not her spiritual guru. You're not her leader. She's grown. We're all grown here. So some women are going to be good girls, and some women are going to be, quote unquote, bad girls. Another thing about good girl syndrome is they are scared to break the stereotypes of their culture, or they're scared of meeting negative stereotypes. They're also scared of isms. They're scared of people being colorist against them. So these are the women who, like Chrissy, where they say, don't compliment Indians. That's an extreme. So you can't. So 3 billion people, or however many billions of people there are of Indian ancestry. Oh no, you can't compliment them because they're colorist. So you're scared. You're actually walking around scared of colorism. So you're scared to interact with somebody based on their ethnicity because you feel like you are going to get hurt. Isn't that the exact same thing that black people argue against? Black people don't like being negatively stereotyped, right? They don't like being stereotyped as they're dangerous. But I've noticed that a lot of people with good girl syndrome, they're afraid of danger. They're afraid of emotional danger. And so what they'll do is they will actually block themselves off out of fear. And they'll have a mindset of, oh no, he's black. He's going to be colorist. He won't like me. He's not going to pay me. I'm not going to have any opportunities in the black community because I'm dark skinned, so I can't do it. So I'm just going to fail. I'm going to be at the bottom. So they're afraid of isms, they're afraid of breaking stereotypes of their culture, or they're afraid of being stereotyped by other cultures. So these are the people who say stuff like, oh, I got to be on my best behavior around white people. Well, why are they saying that? Well, it's because socially they're afraid of white people. They feel socially beneath white people, like they have to impress white people. And so that's where that's coming from. I mean, be on my best behavior. What they're saying is I can't relax because I'm around people who are going to judge me. I'm scared of being judged by white people, and so I have to be on my best behavior. I have to, quote unquote, act white. A lot of women with good girl syndrome, they are afraid to give things a chance. They're afraid to try new things. So for example, if you have a preconceived notion, every black man's going to hate me because I'm dark skinned, every Indian man is going to be colorist, I can't compliment Indian men or women, then guess what? You're going to have a hard time making friends who are Indian, women or men. You're going to have a hard time making friends or maybe even succeeding in the black community. What if you live in a black city? What if you live in like Atlanta or somewhere like that, and then you have this mindset of, oh, the black community hates me because I'm dark skinned. Well, you're going to walk around actually with stress. You're going to be stressed out. And another thing that a lot of people do, and they screw themselves over, is using this language that is actually harmful to themselves. So for example, they will tell people who have brown skin privilege or, non-dark skin privilege, they will tell these people, you are safe brown. So what they're actually saying is, I am dangerous. My skin tone is actually dangerous. Imagine walking around 24/7, 365 days a year, scared for your life because you have brainwashed yourself into thinking that your existence literally means you're going to get killed or literally means you're going to get shot. That is actually a way to incite mental illness. And if you don't believe me, I will put it up on the screen because that actually causes you to become hypervigilant. If you believe that your actual skin tone itself and you as a person are dangerous or that you will be perceived as dangerous, not only are you going to put yourself in a social box, but you're also walking around with hella stress and trauma because you're like, oh shit, everybody thinks I'm dangerous. Oh my God, everybody thinks I'm going to kill them. Oh, I can't walk down the street with a hoodie on because I'm going to get shot. I'm going to get killed. So now you can't even go on a walk at the park. You can't walk your dog. You can't get a dog because, you have a mindset of, oh, because I'm black, and if I wear a hoodie, I'm automatically going to get killed. So now you can't purchase hoodies. So do you see how easy it is to actually fall lower and lower into this spiral? Do you see why a lot of people with these syndromes, why they spiral so easily and why they have such a bad mindset? Yeah, it's because they have actually put themselves into a psychological trap. They put themselves into a box. They put themselves into, I have to be the good girl. I have to do this. I can't compliment these people. Everybody's colorist. Everybody hates me. And then they're watching content of their fellow people telling them that everyone hates them. But that's another thing about good girls. When you have good girl syndrome, it's because you have been told too many cautionary tales about bad stuff. Like, oh, can't walk outside, you're going to get killed. Oh, well, she's safe. Her skin tone makes her safe. Your skin tone's dangerous. You're fucked with your skin tone. Oh yeah, you're just going to get shot with your skin tone. Like, good girl syndrome means that you've been told, you've been taught a lot of things that have instilled fear into you. And in some religions, they will actually call it the fear of God. They'll talk to you about the devil or Satan or, the big bad white man, the big bad Indian man, the big bad colorist Indians. The big bad colorist monster is going to get you. You can't go and be a singer. You can't sing pop music. Oh no, you can't be carefree because your whole skin tone is dangerous. Oh, you can't be professional. You'll never succeed in your profession. Oh, because you have 4C hair. Your whole entire hair texture is just fucked and just not professional. So a lot of good girls get that way because their churches or their communities have taught them, they've actually instilled fear in them. So then these good girls are walking around with this mentality. I'm afraid to accidentally meet a negative black stereotype. I'm scared to be ratchet sometimes. I'm scared to dance at a party because then they might think I'm ratchet. I'm scared to compliment Indian people because they may be colorist. I'm scared to be around black men because they may be colorist. I'm scared to be around white men because they may be colorist. I'm scared of E. Kane or my light-skinned friend or whoever being colorist, being racist. So they're actually walking around with a lot of fear. People with good girl syndrome, they have internalized a lot of fear. They've internalized a lot of inferiority complexes. And so they can't show themselves in a bikini online because, they're scared that their friends and family will say something. So all of that stuff is fear-based. I'm scared of what people think of me. I'm scared of people being colorist against me. I'm scared of people not liking my hair. I'm scared of this man thinking I'm too fat. I'm scared of moving out of South Africa to a country where they pay for TikTok. I'm scared to admit to myself that I want to be famous on TikTok. I'm scared to admit that I'm jealous of Nara Smith. I'm scared to be called jealous. I'm scared to be called a copycat. I'm scared to be called a psychotical. So do you see how people with good girl syndrome, it's very easy to actually control them because all you have to do is say a couple of words and boom, she goes right back into her place. She goes right back into the hole that she crawled out of because good girls lack boldness. They're scared of criticism. So if you want to stop a good girl from succeeding, all you have to do is basically call her a couple names. Just say a couple of words and boom, she's going to get super mad. She's going to get all enraged. She's going to punch you in the face and then go to jail. She's going to lose her whole job because good girls are very easy to emotionally dysregulate. And I'm talking about this because I have had good girl syndrome myself, so I'm not trying to accuse anybody on here of having it. I will say I have seen some of the symptoms of it though. Another thing about good girls is a good girl does not know how to learn from her own enemies. She doesn't know how to practice healthy comparison. She only practices unhealthy comparison. So in Onezwa's case, for example, Onezwa is actually privileged. She clearly is talented and gifted. She has talent, privilege when it comes to cooking. Clearly she's creative. She's good at doing TikToks or doing whatever. And if she's been in chef competitions or, doing something with that or has achieved some sort of fame, then that means that she has marketing skill. So, but instead of learning from your enemies or practicing healthy comparisons, she only practices the negative comparisons, or at least from what I saw. These are women like Kelly Rowland. Kelly Rowland randomly brought up being second best. Nobody in that interview said anything about her being second best. They were all happy that Kelly Rowland was there. They were there to celebrate Kelly Rowland. They were there to talk to Kelly Rowland. Kelly Rowland is the one who randomly said, I felt second best. Nobody asked her about how she felt compared to Beyonce. Nobody was doing that. She was comparing herself negatively. She doesn't know how to practice healthy comparison. In her song lyric, when she was talking about Beyonce, she practiced unhealthy comparison, basically saying she wanted to be in Beyonce's position. So the way to combat that is to actually practice the healthy form of comparison where it's like, hey, what good things do I have going for me? What am I grateful for? Gratefulness is actually a form of what I would call healthy comparison because, you're grateful for being able-bodied because unfortunately there are some people who are not able-bodied. You're grateful to be Kelly Rowland and that people even know your name because there are thousands of other Black girls where nobody will ever know their name. You're grateful to even be interviewed or whatever. So I've noticed that good girls, they actually suffer from being ungrateful. That's actually one of the very big side effects that I've seen, and I've also suffered from this as well. And part of the reason why they're ungrateful is because they have an external locus of control. So if you're very externally focused, of course you're going to notice good things about others. You're a good girl, so you notice good qualities in other people. You notice, hey, Beyonce is really talented. Hey, Nara Smith is killing it. You're a good girl, so you naturally see the best in others. But unfortunately, a lot of good girls don't know how to see the best in themselves. And so instead of focusing on, wait a minute, I have 4C hair texture privilege, I have dark skin privilege. Instead of focusing on that, oh no, we're only going to focus on people who have light skin privilege. We're going to focus on the privileges I don't have. So instead of me being grateful for my however many followers I have, I'm going to focus on Nara Smith and her followers. Another flaw of the good girl is she cracks under pressure because she is used to living the good girl life. Good girls rarely have conflict. And so anytime a conflict arises, they run. Like anytime that you get some smoke on YouTube, they want to leave the conversation. This is what happened with Chrissy. Even some women who have come on and made YouTube channels about other stuff. Maybe you got a bad comment and now you delete your whole channel. Maybe people are dragging you and you're scared. You have a fear of being dragged. You have a fear of being doxxed. You have a fear of being exposed. That's very common for good girls. You have a fear, constantly living in fear of being exposed. Do you know how many times people have quote unquote exposed me, doxed me, made up lies, make fake screenshots and then they'll say it was me on the screenshot, or they'll try to use a real screenshot to try to make me look bad. People have called me psychotical, diabolical, unlogical, creepyotical. Like they call me every name. It's actually funny. But no, they call me every name. But if you're a good girl, you wouldn't be able to laugh it off. Because another flaw of good girls is they take everything very seriously. They're very emotionally fragile and emotionally dysregulated. So all you have to do is call them a couple names and boom, she's crying. Boom, she's off YouTube. Boom, she's gone. She's angry now. She's yelling and cursing. I think of Rashida Strober actually. I actually do not think that Rashida Strober is a bad girl. I actually think that Rashida Strober, Dark Skin TV, is actually a good girl. I think that she was a good girl her whole life, or tried to be a good girl, or was a good girl and a people pleaser. And then, the anger and resentment just built up to where now she is emotionally dysregulated all the time. The thing about good girls is that they don't know how to stand up for themselves. And so they're constantly at the mercy of their oppressors. They beg others not to abuse them. They beg Black men to not be colorist. They're begging E. Kane to not be colorist. They beg others, don't be colorist, don't be texturist, don't be featurist, please. You're weaponizing my insecurities against you. I can't weaponize anybody's insecurities if they don't have those insecurities. So for the people who say about my channel, she's weaponizing Black women's insecurities. First of all, there are thousands of Black women who do not have those insecurities. And secondly, if I am weaponizing them, then that means you have that insecurity. Nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. But good girls, they don't know how to stand up for themselves. They don't know how to clap back. They don't know how to come back. They don't have any comebacks. or they just get mad and upset and then they try to say you're mean. So they're trying to use guilt. They want you to feel guilty for being mean to them, like what they did with Ekane. They were like, well, that was mean for her to say that. It wasn't what she said, it was the tone of her saying it. So they want Ekane to feel guilty. Ekane literally called herself a black bum bitch from the hood. So do you think that women who identify like that are going to walk around feeling guilty? No, she doesn't give a fuck. And so there are some people where you can't use guilt to manipulate them. But for good girls, oh yes, you can use guilt to manipulate them. But a lot of good girls spend their lives as beggars. You know, they will beg for followers like Oneswa. They will beg for you to not ask about their successful friend like Kelly Rowland. You know, they'll beg for people to stream them. Well, or they won't beg, they'll just avoid. They may avoid success because they have a fear of being seen, kind of like Normani or somebody like that. So they won't even post on social media. They won't even come on and post their music. They're not going to come on and show themselves singing live. Look at the difference between Normani versus Tinashe. And I'm not even going to compare Tinashe being around for longer, but seriously, Tinashe and Normani, I would consider them to have a similar level of talent. I consider both of them to be women who, you know, maybe in the past they felt overshadowed or something like that. But look at how fast Tinashe went to perform that song Nasty at Coachella. When I saw that, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, Tinashe is at Coachella. And I think that Tinashe is also an independent artist, or she left her label or something like that. So she's not begging the label to represent her. That's another issue that I've seen, unfortunately, with women in other communities where they're begging the label to promote their career. And obviously, whoever's in charge of the label, they get to promote whoever the fuck they want. They can pick and choose who they want to promote. There could be people at the label sleeping with executives. I mean, I don't know. There could be people sleeping with them, and then maybe that's how they choose, or maybe they choose based on bad stuff. So if you're a good girl trying to succeed in a bad girl's world, then you're always going to feel like you're at the bottom. Another thing about good girls, they don't know how to stand 10 toes down. They don't know how to point fingers and name names. They leave it up to others to investigate and interpret what they've said and then get mad when they're misunderstood. So these are women who, you know, they don't want to say my name on a live stream or on their YouTube channels. You know, they're too scared. They'll be like, oh, a content creator said this, or a content creator did that, or they'll try to black out the name because they're too cowardly to say, hey, I'm talking to you, Queen Chama. I am talking to you, Carissy. I have no problem saying your names because I am not afraid of your criticism. Because that's a part of being on YouTube. You're going to have your content being criticized. You're going to have people responding to your content. But people with good girl syndrome, they don't know how to stand 10 toes down. You know, they don't know how to say, oh yeah, I messed up on this, or yeah, I've laughed at problematic things. I've laughed at way worse things than what you saw on Chrissy's live stream. I use pictures of Dave Chappelle with the crackhead lips as a part of my memes. I called somebody Miss Refrigerator. I mean, that's very mean, technically. So I'm technically a fat phobic as well. I am technically making fun of crackheads or people who struggle with addiction. So I laugh at problematic things all the time, and I stand 10 toes down on it. But women who have good girl syndrome, you know, they're overcome with guilt. They're so scared of having their image being tarnished, but they're so scared of their image being tarnished to the point where they will never even step out to create a unique image in the first place. So this is where you get the Normanis from and the Kelly Rowlands. This is where you get the Oneswas from. This is where you get the other Exotical who talked about the woman with the BBL. So if you're too much of a good girl, then you actually can't stand out because, you know, you can't break any of the rules. You have to stay within your social norms. You have to stay within your religion. You have to stay within what your parents said, what the black community says. Oh, you got to represent the black community. You need to be a good representative for black women. That's why as soon as I came on YouTube, the first thing I said was, excuse me, I am not Rosa Parks. I am not Kamala Harris. I'm not Barack Obama. I did not come on here to be a representative for my entire community. Everything I say on this channel is just me saying it. It's just me saying it. I stand 10 toes down on everything I said. If you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, you can find someone else. But a lot of good girls, they don't know how to do that because they're used to being in a group. You know, they need others in order for them to do something. They need others' approval. They need other people to support them. These are the women who, like, they can't even post on Instagram without having a whole bunch of people look through their photos. Like, oh, which one do you think is the best? Oh, which hair color should I do? So they have a hard time decision making. Also, good girls have no Karen skills and no mean girl skills. They have no clapback skills. They are not socially strategic. They are too docile. They have no boundaries whatsoever, and they have the fear of being seen. So they will never write the book. They never start the YouTube channel. They may start something and not finish it. These are the types of women who leave the conversation when there's smoke. They never post the pics. They never move to where they want to move. This woman, Oneswa, she has good girl syndrome from what I've seen. So she's going to have a hard time moving out of South Africa because, she has a son. So she may feel like, oh, I feel guilty because my son, I have to pull him out of school, or I have to bring him to a new environment, or I have to learn a new language. I don't know, learn a new culture. I have to leave my family. So women who have the good girl syndrome, they're not going to move to their dream cities or go to their dream college or try to go after that job because they're waiting for life to happen to them. And this is why they're constantly in the beggar's position, begging white Hollywood to correctively promote you, begging white men to date you, begging black men to not be colors, begging light-skinned women to not use their privilege, begging other people who are pretty, begging them not to use their privilege, begging others to feel guilty that they have more in life than you. That is the position of the good girl. A lot of them are constantly led by fear, and they constantly play it safe. So they're also afraid of changing with the times. I've noticed that a lot of good girls, they're used to following the rules. And so they get mad when the rules change. They get frustrated and they get annoyed at innovation. So, for example, those old people who get really mad about like iPhones existing, and then they're like, what the heck, I can't use my flip phone. So they get very mad because they're used to being the good girl or like following the rules. Like, no, this is the phone that you guys have had for a long time. Why are you trying to change it and make it into an iPhone? So these are people who have a hard time acknowledging innovation. They have a hard time acknowledging that maybe on YouTube, for example, maybe the conversations they were having 10 years ago are no longer relevant today, or, maybe their talking points from before are not relevant, or maybe there's somebody else who has innovated their talking points. That whole conversation about the blueprint. We're the blueprint. So some good girls, they are the blueprints. Maybe they came up with a certain idea and then they get mad when people innovate on that idea and they make it better, or they change it, or they twist it, or they flip it, they flip it around and reverse it. Then they get mad. Because good girls, they have a hard time with the rules changing. They're used to, no, these are the rules. If I follow the rules to the T, then I'm going to succeed. Because if I work hard, then I will be successful. It's very good girl rhetoric. So they get mad when other people find loopholes and become successful, or they get the credit for something that they did. Another mindset of the good girl is the scarcity mindset. So this is the mindset that there can only be one. So they tend to have a hyper-competitive mindset. And again, this goes back to that external locus of control. They're very externally focused. They're not self-centered enough. A good girl is somebody who's not self-centered enough. She's constantly focused on, what does Nara Smith have? What does this girl have? What kind of privileges does she have? Oh shit, she's light-skinned. That means she has light-skinned privilege. I don't have that privilege. What kind of privileges does this other person have? Oh, what is the Indian community doing? Oh wow, they're colorists. Okay, I can't talk to them. So they're very externally focused. They're actually not self-centered enough. They spend all of their time looking at other people's flaws instead of improving their own flaws and basically leveling themselves up. And that's why they're at the bottom, because while they're looking at how colorist Indians are, there are Indians all over the world who are not colorists, who are just living their best lives, attaining wealth, moving to where they want to move, dating who they want to date. And then you're over here focusing on, oh, well, they're colorists. Another thing about good girls is they tend to be undisciplined sometimes because they wait on God, spirits, ancestors, their family, or friends to give them permission to pursue their dreams. So a lot of them are not action takers because they're constantly seeking validation. They're constantly people pleasing. Maybe you wanted to work on YouTube content, but you have to go pick up mama and them for the 10th time, even though you really want to set boundaries. So a lot of good girls, they're waiting on permission, so they're very undisciplined. They can't create a schedule and stick to it because they allow other people to impede upon their schedule. Another thing about good girls is they're easily scared off. They're very afraid of being exposed. So for example, when it comes to beauty, let's say you want to look like an exotical, let's say that's your internalized beauty standard. Let's say you are not an exotical and your internalized beauty standard is being an exotical. If you struggle with good girl syndrome, you're going to feel guilty for that. You're going to feel guilty for not meeting your own internalized beauty standard because the rule is that, oh no, you are required to meet your internalized beauty standard. And that's actually not the rule. I made a whole video about how I do not meet my own personal internalized beauty standard. And I have no shame in saying that because I am honest with myself and I can say, hey, I think that a fake ponytail looks better than my ponytail. I think it looks better. I think it looks more like a princess, and that is the aesthetic that I want. I like glamorous beauty. I like eyelids that are sparkly. So no, my eyelids are not naturally sparkly, so I technically am not meeting my own internal beauty standard. But let's say you have like 4C hair. Let's say you want to relax your hair, you want to texturize it because you like how 3C hair looks. Maybe you think 3C hair is the prettiest, or you're like me, you think synthetic hair is the prettiest. Nobody can tell me nothing. Okay, if I have my long like braiding hair or like my little curly hair piece, that is my standard of beauty. But what people will do is they will try to guilt you and scare you off. They'll say, oh, relaxers, that's very unhealthy for you. You know, that's unhealthy for your body. But that's fake concern. They're not concerned about your body. Half of the people who tell you relaxers are unhealthy, plastic surgeries are unhealthy, they just got done eating some Cheetos before they made that video. So they're over here having this fake concern about you getting a plastic surgery or changing something about yourself. But in reality, good girls are so used to being surpassed. You know, they're used to everyone surpassing them socially and social climbing past them to the point where they will start trying to use morals or use danger, you know, to manipulate you into not doing stuff to improve yourself. So these are the ones who say you don't need to dress up for that event. We're just going to a picnic. We're just going to the cookout. We're just going to the concert. Why do you need to put on so much makeup? Why do you need to put on a fake ponytail? Why are you trying to make your hair look sleek? Why are you trying to make your skin look all smooth? Who are you trying to impress? So good girls actually turn into the haters sometimes because they are used to socially feeling like they're at the bottom or feeling like everyone is surpassing them. And so they'll try to scare you off with fake concern, like, oh, are you sure you want to go on that diet? You know, that's unhealthy. You don't want to pass out. So that it's fake concern. Anyway, do you have good girl syndrome? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.